Good evening and welcome to the newest edition of LSTV. Thank you for joining me. I am Lance Sisney. Let's get started. Tonight I would like to start by introducing some good news for a change. We have to acknowledge that even though there is a decline in many areas of our civilization, that there are still some progresses being made. The first evidence I would like to point out to demonstrate this would be the reduction in the death rate of unintentional deaths for children between the ages of 10 and 19 years. Now, I know that may not seem like such a significant factor to most people, but the fact that we as a species have been able to reduce the death rate of our children who are most vulnerable of the species to accidents that could have been prevented, I think is a testament to our progress as a modern society. And as much as I would like to celebrate that as a success, I do have to look back and question some of the measures that we have taken to achieve this success. Um, I mean, I'm sure a lot of the decisions were on the behalf of the vulnerable children. However, I wonder how many of the decisions that have been made to form our society in the past, 50, 100 years have really been directed at that motive. Um, the first example I would like to bring up is something that I think a lot of people would, understand that the act of prohibition was, I feel like, I mean, the intentions behind that would most likely have been to preserve life. I mean, I think, they thought that the alcohol was uh, a problem with society and that the addiction and chemical addiction was something that needed to be addressed early on. So they started with the regulation of the chemical substances. Then, however, in a little bit of investigation of the reasons behind prohibition, I think this part stands out to me immediately, and it's very it's kind of glossed over, I think, in the whole text of the article from history.com. But it explains that, in fact, before the passing of the 18th Amendment in 1919 and the nationwide ban that went into effect in January 1920 on the sale or importation of intoxicating liquor, it wasn't the mobsters who ran the most organized criminal schemes in America, but corrupt political bosses, explains Howard Abansky, a criminal justice professor at St. John's University and author of Organized Crime. So the statement here being made that I believe could, hold some weight in our current discussion is that those who would attempt to regulate the transfer of goods and services in a post-war era were the political bosses who maybe most likely, in my opinion, in light of being indicted on their war crimes, were in the process of creating a transfer of power over to the private organizations after the creation of the Federal Reserve. I just like to look at some of the factors that took place before the act of prohibition, if we could just look into some of this, because one of the major parts of history that a lot of people don't like to go back and revisit is that the creation of the privatized Federal Reserve, the year that it was created, if we could just pull that up real quick. December 23rd, 1913. Now, there had to have been a reason why there needs to be the influx of currency into our system in 1913. So, we could look at what happened directly after the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, and that would be the implementation of the federal income tax shortly thereafter. But never mind that. Never mind that they created an imaginary treasury to start taking your money out of your paycheck without your permission. Let's gloss over all that realities. What was really going on at the time in the worldwide stage was World War I. We were in the process of becoming engaged into a major world conflict that would establish our nation as a major world power and a military uh, uh, opponent. So, there had to be a lot of gearing up for that war. And, ultimately, I believe, history writes that we were somehow the, you know, victors of that conquest. And what immediately followed World War One was the Roaring Twenties, a time of prosperity in America that is hard to be matched in any of the decades since. Maybe the 50s and possibly 80s and 90s. But since then, the progress that the American economy has made has barely been rivaled since the Roaring Twenties. And what was going on in the 20s is everybody was partying. Everybody was having a good time. All that money they made from World War One and all that wartime progress was great, except there's a problem. The United States government was starting to gain a lot of strength. And they realized that the citizens were enjoying themselves a little too much. They had a little bit too much access to recreational information and recreational substances that did not make them dependent on the federal government. And in fact, at the same time, the Rockefeller Medical Institute was starting to take over. But, that's all what happened in the years prior to, during, and leading up to Prohibition. We can just remember where we are on the timeline. So Prohibition happened in those years after the Roaring Twenties, or partially during the Roaring Twenties. That the United States government decided, y'all people are having too much fun. Y'all people enjoying yourselves too much. Y'all need to calm down, and we need to get some tax money off of that substance abuse that y'all be doing after our usage of your bodily labor to further our interests. And of course, once they started taking alcohol and good times away from the people, what happened next? What was the inevitable next thing that could have? I mean, there's no way that could have been predicted that when you take away the people's good times, that we have a Great Depression. Now, the Great Depression was not just a banking fiasco and part of the Prohibition doctrine. There was also this thing called the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl happened during this time period, and I mean, it was a climactic event that ended up, ravaging crops and our food system because of, ended up in famine and shortages over the world. But I'm gonna put all these links in my notes downstairs. But it says here, pardon that beat there. was caused by severe economic and agricultural factors, including federal land policies, changes in regional weather, farming. It's, I'll put all these links down there. You'll see the Dust Bowl was real. But so they know the Dust Bowl was real. We also know weather modification was real. And, well, so if we know weather modification was real, what was going on back then? How long ago is weather modification going on? Well, we got this report from the Special Commission on Weather Modification. I think this report goes back to the 50s or the 60s. And, if we can take government work for anything, it takes about 20, 30 years for anything to get reported correctly or even produced because nobody wants to put their name on any of this stuff. So, got the Special Commission on Weather Modification talking about how do we do weather modification back in the 50s and 60s. And this is way after corporations and practices, because there was no regulation back then, already started implementing the practice of weather modification. So, this is just the official report on the fact. And all this stuff is leading up to, hold on. I don't want to get too much in. Okay, here we go. All of this is leading up to World War II. And there's a lot of things that you can say was a cause of World War II. The continuation of World War One and Pearl Harbor, which is kind of being challenged as a staged event now. But and then, we can also go back and look at what's happening in Hawaii right now. Well, let's just not look at all the similarities. Let's not look at all the things that could be, considered conspiratorial in this aspect. We have this American hero who was running the show. He was the man, Eisenhower, during World War II. He commanded. Let's see. Let's look about Eisenhower a little bit. But while we're on the subject, what did Eisenhower do during World War II? I mean, I think if we look up at it, we can look at it and I think somewhere in here it shows how his New Look policy of nuclear deterrence prioritized inexpensive nuclear weapons while reducing funding for expensive army divisions. He continued Harry S. Truman's policy of recognizing Taiwan as a little legitimate government of China. Look at that. He continued Harry S. Truman's policy of recognizing Taiwan as a legitimate government of China. And he won congressional approval of the Formosa Revolution. His administration provided major aid to help. Eisenhower is a big deal here, and I'm sure you can look him up on Wikipedia yourself like this, but I didn't really expect that to be what I pulled up when I pulled up that link. Actually, in fact, I thought I was going a little bit different direction in his military career, but he was also formidable in World War II. He led two of the major fronts in the European conflict. I think this may be what I was trying to pull up right here. Hold on, let's see. I think that no, I was actually okay, but that link didn't come up the way I thought it would. But so Mr. Eisenhower preceded the election of John F. Kennedy in 1960. So Mr. Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, was elected in 1956. He was the 34th president of the United States. And what happened during Mr. Eisenhower's tenure in office? Well, I'll show you right now. This is what happened during Mr. Eisenhower's tenure in office, the American public had decided, I believe, as a whole, that they thought that the president and the military had too much close connection, so they passed the what was the name? The House Joint Resolution 27, setting a limit of 2 4-year terms for future presidents. This happened after Mr. Eisenhower won his presidency in 1956, immediately before John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960. And though I didn't pull up the history of that election, I would implore you to look back on it yourself. You will find that one of the aspects of the history of the election of John F. Kennedy in 1960 was the fact that Hawaii sent an alternate slate of electors in order to certify the election for John F. Kennedy against what would have been considered the approval of the congressional district vote. And I think that began the long, lengthy history of electoral challenge to the American voting system. Now, this is something we're still going through today, so I think you understand why I bring this up and why I think it's still relevant. But I don't think you can possibly expect where I'm going with it. And if you've lasted this long, I salute you. I imagine that you felt like you've heard some boring shit you really didn't care a whole lot about, but if you want to be entertained, here's what I'm here to do. I'm here to entertain you. Here's something I think might be interesting. I wanted to know how long the history of human cloning has been going on for. And I started to look into it, and I found a very interesting website that explains some of it from the Genetics Learning Center of this is a university, but it's talking about the years that we began experimenting on human cloning. And so we'll get into some of the years. 1928, really close to World War II. The cell nucleus controls embryonic development. That seems quite significant. And then we get into 1952. Between 1928 and 1952, it's about 20 years of development. 1952, just before the Eisenhower election, the first successful nuclear transfer. I mean, that seems quite significant. And, if you take into account all of the facts of the German technology and the weird stuff that we accuse the Germans and the Russians of doing and developing during the World War II and the Cold War days, I mean, how much successful work was there done in the implementation of genetics and cloning? Which is where I get to the reason why I made this video for all of you. Is basically a tweet that I read, and it was quite interesting. And I'm crazy. I know we're all crazy. We all got something funny to say. But I think this really, I think this is just, if anything, is entertaining. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to read this with you. And we're just going to go down the bunny hole and see what it says. We don't have to believe it. We don't have to be part of it. We just have to, be part of the story, And cheers. Thanks if you've made it this far. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. That was horrible. I know. But I'm making sure you're still awake. Hey, cheers. You see how slow it is anyways. But I want to read to you this post from this guy, Cobb or whatever. K-A-B. I know. This sounds crazy, all right? You don't have to believe it. I'm not saying this is true. I'm just saying if it's a story, it's a good story. I'm just going to read it along with you so we can all hear it the same way together. By the way, thank you for staying there with me this long. I've had a good time. Thank you. It says, I want to take a moment to remind everyone about the biggest deception being perpetuated on the human race. No one talks about it because people don't believe it could be real. Rapid human cloning. From this deception, every other deception is made possible. The information I share comes directly from Judith's telepathic Pleiadian contact. I mean, yeah, I know it sounds a little crazy, but let's just hear them out. It's at least it's entertaining. You don't have to switch channels right away. Just give them another minute. It can't be researched on the internet. This information will contradict other information you've heard, but if you consider what I'm saying, it will make more sense than anything else. First, a reminder that years before any conspiracy theorists talked about doubles or actors in masks, I was here talking about cloning. And I haven't followed this guy this long, so I can't confirm this, but I'll take his word for it. Still, many people reject this information because it is just too strange. Truth is stranger than fiction, but it is because fiction is obliged to stick to possibilities. Truth isn't. This is a Mark Twain saying. These days that doesn't mean it's harder to get that point across because of the author, but we'll leave that into a different discussion. Rapid cloning was given to the U.S. military in the 1950s by Zeta Greys, aliens, on behalf of negative Orion reptilians. Maybe they're the bad guys. I don't know. I know. Stay with me. It's hard. I know. The military-industrial complex is controlled by a satanic cabal that allowed elites to use this technology to their advantage. I mean, the story's got to pull the reader in. I mean, if they just say they're doing it for some corporate money-making scheme, it's not as impactful. So just follow along, okay? From a person's DNA, they can grow a duplicate body in 5 months. They can transfer memories to a clone body and program it with speech patterns and mannerisms. The clone is a biological duplicate without DNA, without the ability to reproduce, and sometimes with added technology. A clone is not an exact match because our appearance is a result of both genetic and years of experiences in life. There are physical differences between clones. The first celebrities were cloned for financial gain in the 1970s, and it was spread to politics in the 1990s. By the year 2000, it was everywhere in media and industry. It started with the military, and it is done in black site NSA facilities worldwide. Only black hats using cloning, never white hats. It's about money and control. There are many A-list celebrities that use clones in movies or to perform on stage. Not everyone who uses clones is a Satanist. Some were just tricked into thinking they could achieve immortality. Some good people have been replaced with evil clones. In the modern era, there have been many secret arrests, and the cabal uses clones to replace their own. Nobody will disclose cloning because it is too hard for regular people to believe. There is no show of white hats using doubles or clones. White hats arrest, black hats replace their own. No one wants to tell us the truth for different reasons. People like Trump have hinted about it, saying that people like Biden, Xi, and Putin are different men and look different, doesn't know he's alive, or using words like puppet. There are many clones dispersed throughout the populations or many countries who are very docile and obedient citizens. This is what the cabal wants for the planet. The black and bruised eyes can signify cloning updates. They connect technology to the brain through the eye and transfer new information to the clone. Only important clones in the media, politics, or industry are updated. They still use the eye, but now some clones are updated through their foot. This is why some notable people wear orthopedic boots or are seen limping. Cloning doesn't involve the parasites called vril. This is fiction introduced by someone named Donald Marshall. It's just a completely technological process. The vril named narrative just makes cloning harder to believe. I mean, I'm putting this link in here. You can read all this. I mean, it's a lot of. I mean, so if you want to be entertained by the imaginations of others, I say read on further. If you think all this is crazy, you don't have to go anywhere with it. I'm just saying it's hard to think that what we hear every day today seems like exactly what it is that they're telling us. And I hate to be skeptical about every part of it, but it's just, like I said, it's just hard to go along with a lot of it. So, I mean, you know, I guess have an open mind, check it out, think for yourself, challenge those narratives that they want you to believe without questioning, because I think that is where the danger occurs when they tell you you have to agree with their narrative and that you don't have the choice to challenge it. Because if you are being told that you don't have the choice to challenge it, then you are being attacked in your ability to think for yourself. And that is about all I have to say. Thank you for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful evening. It's been nice sharing this with you. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Some will win, some will lose. Some are born to sing the blues. Oh, the movie